Nostalgia makes fools of us all, and that's made especially apparent when it comes to pop culture. Media discourse runs like clockwork at this point. You get that first wave of people that see it and reach a collective conclusion on it, we forget about it for a while, then a few years later everyone's younger siblings discover it on streaming and tell us we're wrong actually.
How dare I? How dare you?
We've seen this for the prequel trilogy, we've seen this for the Andrew Garfield Spider-Mans, and we'll probably keep seeing this weird whiplash of evaluation and re-evaluation for as long as media continues to exist. But regardless of where you lay in the evaluation, re-evaluation alignment chart, I think it's safe to say that the fact we're even able to have these conversations in the first place is because the media in question is able to find a second life on streaming. Suddenly these major shows that rocked forum posts like 20 years ago have found new life on Discord calls now that a major streaming service reminded the collective populace that it was a thing that existed. And it made me curious if there was a certain cutoff point where this wouldn't be possible anymore. Shows like Lost or Avatar: The Last Airbender came out in the early 2000s, that sweet spot in pop culture history where everyone still watched cable and TV, and streaming wasn't really a thing yet. Not only did a monoculture exist to uplift these series among general audiences, but fast forwarding to the present, the exact right amount of time has passed for newer audiences to discover it via streaming. Two very distinct platforms. Compare that to now, where while we still have breakout hits on streaming, it feels more like a vocal minority has taken it upon themselves to hype it up rather than everybody and their mom already knowing about it through osmosis. You'd be lucky any streaming shows find a second life and audience through liquid brain injection TV or whatever ends up replacing streaming down the road. This is all to say that there was a transitional period between TV and streaming, where even though we got some shows with a really solid, compelling premise, they ended up getting lost in the shuffle of everyone figuring out how to advertise TV and movies in a world where Netflix was making scheduled weekly TV obsolete. I remember these shows making some big splashes when they premiered, but now not only have they become so quickly forgotten, you can't even find any of these on streaming unless you pay for these series individually like some kind of weirdo. So let me talk your ear off about the TV of the 2010s that made some big splashes in their premiere, only to putter out after that first episode.
And this has been happening since the accident?
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever seen a coping mechanism quite like it.
I'm awake with my wife, and I close my eyes, I open them, I'm awake with my son.
Well, I can assure you, Detective Britton, this is not a dream.
It's exactly what the other should have said.
I'm gonna be honest, visual novel adaptations have never done it for me. When you take the story outside of its intended medium, it just doesn't hit as emotionally as the original. It's like trying to microwave a turkey. You probably could get away with it, but there's a reason it's not done. Awake is if a visual novel got an actual good adaptation. You're introduced to Michael Britton, an LA police detective played by Mr. Malfoy himself, Jason Isaacs. Following a fatal car accident, Britton lives a split reality. He lives one life where his wife died in the crash, then when he goes to sleep, he wakes up in another reality where his son died. Is that the kid from Goosebumps?
Oh, come on, it's about models.
Hi.
Going forward, he's subjected to therapy in both worlds where both therapists try and convince him that their reality is the true one, and that he has to let the other one go since pretending a dead loved one is still alive is, creepy and wrong.
As I said, there's no therapeutic value in allowing you to pretend that your realities are interchangeable.
It's a really solid premise with a strong premiere, but it does make you wonder how things would work on an episode-to-episode basis. For one thing, the premise is admittedly confusing if you want to keep track of which reality is which. Series creator Kyle Killen has mentioned that the dead son reality has more reds in it, while the dead wife reality has more greens. But watching through, I don't know, dude, maybe I'm just blind. Honestly, it's just one of those things where you gotta write everything down, because even when they mention in-show that Britton wears a different color wristband to keep track of which reality he's in, his wrist won't always be visible, so I think this was just gonna be an inherent problem no matter what. And to be fair, they do take advantage of how disorienting the premise can get sometimes. Britton will end up talking to the wrong partner, he mixes up the cases he's working on. I'm honestly surprised he functions at all in either world and isn't just like paralyzed by the reality reality that has become his life? Because how do you actually wrangle in this premise into something even remotely digestible to the NBC audience? Again, keep in mind that this series aired in 2012, that awkward in-between time when networks were starting to experiment with high-concept series with overarching stories, but would still lean heavily on an episodic formula so as to not alienate their core viewership. And what they settle on is to take the general formula of a police procedural drama, except the main character cheats. Yeah, this is where that visual novel energy starts to kick in. The more intriguing part of Awake's episodic stories are that Britton takes advantage of his knowledge in one reality and makes use of them in another. Have a suspect that died before you got a statement out of him? It's cool, just get it from them in the other reality. I'm sure that'll hold up in the court of law. The basic formula of this series from episode to episode is Britton having a case in one reality, he gets stuck and finds a clue based on some overlap he's found between the two realities, and he uses that as his cheat code to find the bad guy. Does this rely heavily on trusting that people are exactly the same between both realities? Yeah, what's your point? I don't care if you have one episode where the babysitter is successful in one reality and an addict in the other one. Besides her, everyone else is the same. Except for the wife and son, I guess. They're dead. In another episode, Britton is faced with a hostage that injects him with fentanyl. The hallucinations then creep into his other reality, and I get that the show previously explained that it's impossible to figure out which reality a concept was first introduced in, but like, it seems pretty cut and dry that he got drugged in one world and it carried over to the other one, so he ends up seeing CG penguins and shit.
Are you experiencing hallucinations?
But even ignoring the iffiness of the world's mechanics, I think the biggest detriment to the series is the absolute chore that was those middle episodes. How do you make a series about alternate realities so boring? Okay, so besides the A-plot, that is Britton's police procedural stuff, the B-plot of episodes typically involves him either interacting with his son or wife, both still grieving after the car crash. Right away, you start to get the feeling that even with the episodes being 43 minutes, you're not gonna have enough time to cover each of the characters to a satisfactory emotional depth. So instead of having a broader scope where Britton's able to interface with his son and wife in both realities, episodes usually prioritize either the son or the wife. In the dead wife reality, Britton's son Rex develops an interest in tennis, you find out he's been building a motorcycle at his friend's house, he gets a girlfriend. Like, they're admittedly on par with something you'd find on the Disney Channel, but they're at least varied and give an idea of what Rex is like as a person. Compare that to the wife, who's just kinda there? She gives off secondary character in a male-centric novel you'd find at an airport bookstore energy. Hannah's whole character is to just be the trophy wife, which you could have admittedly taken in some interesting directions as she's dealing with the death of Rex. Early on, Britton admits to his therapist that the only other person he's told his split reality dilemma to was his wife, which could have been really interesting, but she's immediately like, hearing about you going on off-reality fanfiction adventures with her son without me is harshing my mellow, and she just conveniently forgets he brought that up to begin with.
Hearing about it, talking about it wasn't comforting. It was torture.
The only things she really does is repaint the house and express some interest in going back to college, which, I don't know. I think what really damned her role in her own universe, though, is that unlike Rex being a major focus in his reality, she isn't really the main focus in hers. For one, she's got to share that reality with BD Wong, who just has such a commanding stage presence, even just sitting in a chair half the time.
And sadly, but crucially, there's no world in which your son survived the accident.
Yeah, there's probably a reason why they kept bringing him back in Jurassic Park movies.
Nothing in Jurassic World is natural.
He delivers such sharp, direct dialogue in this almost disarmingly soft tone, and it works every time. Additionally, I think the staff knew Hannah was starting to get boring because just as I was ready to file the series under good idea, bad execution, they dropped this bombshell.
Dad, I got her pregnant. She lost it.
Are you?
How did you know?
Oh, I'm back in, baby! Emma is one of those characters that's like, deceptively interesting. Like, functionally, she's 100% just there so you have a younger character in the dead son reality, but the more you think about it, the more interesting the character becomes. Besides the therapist, Emma is the one character that Britton is introduced to post-car crash that he interacts with on a semi-regular basis. Since we never know which reality is the true one, in theory, Emma is the one character that Britton has to invent from scratch. He has no prior knowledge of the person, so Britton is just piecing together what she's like based on Rex's interactions with her in the dead wife reality, and then trusting all that carries over to the other reality, and then add baby mama drama into the mix. I shouldn't be this invested, but I am. And she voices Miss Martian in that one DCAU movie I already forgot about.
I'm Miss Martian, jackass.
Actually, between her and Bird's actor, it's weird that both had roles in DC animated projects. It was especially weird hearing Harris as a detective since he essentially played the same role in the Batman cartoon a few years earlier.
Old Bats never leaves a trace.
The whole time I was watching, I joked to myself that he was gonna turn into Clayface and have a tragic thematic death by the finale, which,
Oh, God.
At least he didn't turn into Clayface! Yeah, the finale really goes places. Without spoiling much, I will say it takes the visual novel premise and amps things up significantly. Those last 2 episodes are essentially endgame visual novel plots, where you're constantly bouncing back and forth between branching pathways, reloading save files, and having each branch get increasingly darker and more different from each other until one is very definitively the bad ending and the other is the good ending. It's even got a puzzle where you're locked out of a laptop and you gotta find the password by hopping to the other reality for it. You're just in full video game territory at this point and it's great. It's a kind of ending that's ambiguous enough to serve as a proper finale, but it does make me wonder what a season 2 would have been like. While the weekly crime aspect and family drama were the immediate allure of Awake, an underappreciated aspect of the show was how its protagonist went out of his way to further himself from becoming mentally well. As both psychiatrists have time and time again mentioned to Britton, his unwillingness to accept either reality as false continues to lead him down a path of self-destructiveness. To Britton, neither his son nor his wife have died. Because both realities are believable, he's willing to accept both of them as true, which is like super unhealthy, but the series always frames it as this heartwarming, noble thing he's willing to put himself through.
But I swear to you both that I will find the people who did this. And I'll make them pay.
May all your Delulu become true, Lulu. Resurrection is a mystery box series in every way possible. Its main intrigue is that it promises to answer all this intrigue surrounding its fun premise, all while doing little to nothing in the way of actually fleshing out the characters or world along the way. Like, okay, you're allowed to hype up your main course while it's in the oven, but at least offer some appetizers while we're waiting. The series opens with Jacob, a little white boy that wakes up in the middle of China. How zany! Eventually, immigration agent Marty Bellamy, played by Mr. Love and Basketball himself, Omar Epps, is assigned to pick up the boy from the airport and find out who his parents are. Jacob is shy at first, but after being coaxed with what is clearly a ROM of Donkey Kong on Bellamy's 2014 iPhone,
Donkey Kong, man after my own heart.
He trusts him enough to write down the word Arcadia, which, honestly, that still isn't much to go on, considering there's like 30 Arcadias in the United States alone, kid. But whatever, they end up in Anytown Arcadia, Bellamy does more convenient off-screen sleuthing, and they end up at the front door of the Langstons, an elderly couple that's confused to find Bellamy and Jacob at their door. While they do admit to having had a son named Jacob, the boy died 30 years ago! And that's pretty much the intrigue of the series. How'd Jacob come back? Why come back now? Why'd he end up in China? How does Jacob even feel about any of this? Will he get answers to any of these questions? I get that this is the appeal of mystery box shows, but it's just never done it for me. Doubly so when it's so obvious the show is writing everything from the seat of their pants. They try so hard to establish another returned human, Caleb, as the series antagonist, just to give some semblance of a track to set their train on, but then the second they arrest him, he just disappears? So then they try to pivot over to making the sheriff the new villain, which kinda works, and add some family drama since he's Jacob's uncle and he low-key blames Jacob for the death of his wife. But then they try making the Returned as a whole the villains, as more and more start coming to life and finding their way back to Arcadia.
What the hell is that thing?
But then, when season 2 starts, they just kinda hand-wave all the Return showing up and have a secret government facility take them all prisoner. Remember Heroes? This is just every pitfall of Heroes, but on a faster timeline. It's like with every rewrite and shift in focus, things just keep getting messier and messier. Like, they never fleshed out a solid foundation for lore, so everything past "what if dead people came back to life" feels either underdeveloped or weirdly overdeveloped to the point of being a detriment. Early into the show, they established that the Returned eat. Like, a lot. And it feels like a nice way to flesh out how the Returned function, but ultimately falls flat since, like, there's no way any family can support anyone eating so much on a regular basis, so they just conveniently forget that detail over time. And I feel like so much of the lore gets similar treatment where it comes off as strong and just kinda putters out until it's forgotten entirely. Eventually, we find out that Bellamy was a Returned that came back as a baby like 30 plus years ago.
I was dead the whole time.
That's one way of looking at it.
There's a virus that only the returned are getting, Jacob's grandma gets returned and she has the most anime ability of killing a returned person permanently by making sure they've lost the will to live.
She's lost the will to live? What is your degree in poetry?
Actually, I kinda like the grandma, if only because it feels like she's really eating every bit of the script she's given.
What the hell did Barbara ever do for you?
Real bad bitch energy. I shouldn't be attracted, but I think this is my baddie awakening moment. But also, it's in the grandma's best scene at the family dinner that I realized just how soap opera the series has become.
It is my purpose, my mission, to bring this family back together.
So the sheriff's wife ends up returning, and Jacob's dad wants to be a good guy and invite his brother and in-law over to dinner, completely disregarding everyone else's feelings about it. See, not only was the sheriff's wife partially responsible for Jacob's death, but she was also cheating on the sheriff with some other townie rando. And Jacob's dad, for some reason, decided to keep this a secret from his brother for like decades? So the sheriff and his wife accept the invite, only to end up attending the most awkward dinner ever.
Looks like we're out.
Jacob's dad is a certified dumbass that doesn't get why what he did was wrong, and Jacob's mom is just not having it.
If you had ended that affair when Henry told you to, my son would never have died. I'd say you should understand, but you know what? You have no idea what it is to be a mother.
Yeah, tell him to eat shit and fall off her horse, Lucy. Like, it's a genuinely compelling scene, but also, remember when the show was about dead people coming back to life? It just gets so caught up in its own web of family drama, and every time you think it wants to shift gears, it just gets further stuck in the muck of its own making. Looking at the episode count for season 2 and how far into it I was so sure that the grandma would be the last villain of the season. But with like 3 episodes left in the series, they introduce another one!
Hello.
So, early into season 1, we're introduced to Pastor Tom, as played by Mark Hildreth, aka goddamn Hero Yui from Gundam Wing.
I'll just do it. And mission accomplished.
He was Jacob's friend and classmate back in the day, plus his old pregnant girlfriend is also a returned. It was a whole thing for like 2 seconds.
Did I really die?
Anyway, Tom fucking dies in the middle of a race riot because a returned are an allegory for racism now, I guess. And now Arcadia is in need of a new priest. Enter Preacher James, a returned who sees the returned as a sign of the apocalypse.
Saw it, didn't you?
Honestly, you don't even get what his deal is at first. Bellamy pins him as this fast-talking con man that keeps saying that he can raise anyone back from the dead, which, I mean, in a town where people keep coming back from the dead, just how necessary is that as an ability? Necessary enough to kill Jacob's dad and immediately bring him back just to prove his powers are real, I guess. But what even is the point of all of this? He gains a cult following, takes control of the town, and uses his newfound mob to target Rachel, Tom's old girlfriend who Preacher James claims is pregnant with Satan? I don't fucking know anymore, man. This series sucks. It tosses out every interesting thing about it and just degenerates into this family soap opera with like the vaguest essence of paranormal creepiness to it. If the series just maintained the focus on Jacob, that would have been enough, but it gets too big, too fast, and by the time some semblance of a roadmap for future episodes was set up, it ends on a cliffhanger. Yeah, the baby was Satan after all. Good luck with that. In most media I watch, I think you can get away with having a good plot and underdeveloped characters, or an underdeveloped plot and good characters. Ideally, you'd have both, but bare minimum, you gotta have at least one. Resurrection has neither. There's signs of good characters, there's signs of a good story, but in reality, everyone is just kinda aimlessly wandering around waiting for something vaguely interesting to happen. It might as well be watching a fish tank or the screensaver on a DVD player. It just left such a bad taste in my mouth to the point that I was certain it didn't even have the foundation of a good series. So, funny thing with Resurrection, every time I looked it up, I'd inevitably find someone comparing it to the French TV drama The Returned. Yeah, confused yet? Well, the two aren't based on the same source material, it would definitely be hard to argue that, since, well, they're pretty similar. Small town where a kid comes back from the dead, other return follow including a criminal and a jilted lover with baby mama drama, the season 1 finale ends with a ton of people returning at once. Like, you don't have to stretch to find these similarities, and yet it's in the details that The Returned is so clearly the superior take on the concept. For now. For one, it has a very clear idea of what the concept should be like, where Resurrection really takes its time figuring out what the dead coming back is an allegory for, and even then it kind of backtracks on that a few times.
Is that a child of God or something else?
The Returned, are very clearly an allegory for, well, death. Every person that comes back is treated in one way or another like a ghost, not just to the other characters, but by the series itself. There's some actual thoughtful direction put into how each of them is treated, and it all helps add to this feeling of eeriness. The Returned also makes good use of the very obvious age gap between the humans and the Returned. In the case of Camille, the 15-year-old that died when her bus crashed during a field trip, it's been 4 years since her death. Her surviving twin sister is now a college student and regular bar enjoyer. Simone was a 20-something in a rock band with a kid on the way, only to die 10 years ago. Now his former partner Adele has taken on a steady career at the library and is a decent mother to her now 10-year-old daughter. Even the barkeep has moved on, keeping a low profile after his serial killer brother finally gets his comeuppance after a string of killings and kidnappings. Each of the surviving characters, as different as they are from each other, went from the same process of grieving those they lost and have done their best to move on. So when those people end up coming back, that alone is enough to serve as a solid anchor for horror in the series. When Camille first comes home, she makes herself a sandwich as if no time has passed, all while her mom stares at her, too scared to speak. Because The Return knows that it doesn't need much in the way of drama to make this concept work. The drama is already baked into the premise. Going forward, the cast naturally has to figure out how to essentially undo their grief. Is that something even worthwhile? How does that affect others in the town? Plenty of whom have had their own loved ones that haven't come back. In comparison to Resurrection, The Returned plays things very quietly, because it knows it can do a lot with the obvious questions the concept naturally brings up. So you don't need a big mystery to string along the... okay, this asshole. Okay, so The Return technically does have something of a mystery box element in its character Victor, a return that has no family to come back to at first, so he attaches himself to Julie, a doctor and apparent sole survivor of other returned person Sergei's serial killing spree 7 years ago. Victor does get some backstory revealed in season 1, but in the present day, he is essentially a mystery. He keeps quiet most of the time, and more or less comes and goes as he pleases, using paranormal powers to kill whoever he comes across. He's like the Bogarts in Harry Potter, but instead of taking the form of your worst fear, he instills the form of your worst, death? It's hard to explain, and feels very intentionally vague and confusing, because everything else about the series feels so grounded and well thought out. I'd say it's the one strike I have against the first season, but then the season 1 finale happens and it's just, huh? So I mentioned how the series treats the Returned as ghosts that the surviving cast needs to learn to make amends with. It's very clear from the get-go that every Returned has undone some piece of their surviving family in a way that must be resolved by the series end. And yet by the season 1 finale, the Returned make this sudden heel turn and are treated more like aliens? The town is eventually hit with a swarm of Returned, but unlike the ones we've met so far, these ones are completely silent and seem to be controlled by Lucy, the town psychic. It all feels like such a sharp left turn from what the show was taking the time to establish up until that point that I kinda wonder if this was a change they made once they realized the series was doing well enough to get picked up for a season 2. But hey, season 1 on the whole was a pretty solid watch. And looking at online reviews for season 2, I don't think I have much to worry about. How could the internet be this wrong? Where season 1 of The Returned was a mostly focused meditation on grief and how the return of a loved one can set back so much mental progress, season 2... honestly, I have no idea what season 2 is. There's all this expanded lore with the psychics and the Returned that don't speak, and the aftermath of the town after the flood, and how the floods made a blockade that separates the Returned from the living, and you're like, oh, is that a metaphor? And all the living are trying to connect with the Returned after what happened in the season 1 finale, and like, some get to the Returned town just by getting lost in the forest, but others literally shoot themselves because I guess they know they're gonna wake up in the Returned's town? Remember Heroes? There's just so much going on in Season 2, and it really makes me miss just how simple the setups for Season 1's episodes were. In Season 1, every episode would be split into a flashback of a character giving some context as to how they died, and the present day, where you see how their return has affected their community. Yeah, there are plenty of exceptions and deviations, but for the most part, it was a very direct setup and payoff. A real function over form approach, though I guess in this case it was function and form? This analogy is falling apart, I should probably finish things. By the series finale, like half the characters aren't anywhere near where you'd think they'd end up, and I don't mean that as a compliment. The dreamy dead rocker boyfriend is being manipulated by the psychic, but maybe not, and he's a double agent and wants to get back with his wife. The twin family is just like, absolutely in shambles. The serial killer gets a redemption arc, but only kinda. Then you find out there's a giant hole connecting the living and dead, and we get this big ol' open-ended conclusion. Open because there's a hole. I don't know, man. These shows have been really hit or miss for me. Surely there's a show from this era that's able to rein in its high concept premise with something more simple and episodic, and maybe star the guy from the Fantastic Four movies.
My name is Henry Morgan. My story is a long one. My life is just like yours, except for one small difference. It never ends.
Oh shit, it's Mr. Fantastic! Oh shit, it's the guy from Taxi! Cuba Gooding Jr.? You know you're watching a police procedural when you notice people from some pre-existing things. And that works retroactively too. Like, look at Stranger Things boy showing up as a random sad kid in an episode. I'm not saying that Awake and Forever are one-to-one copies of each other, but if we're talking broader brushstrokes, it's kinda weird that they existed so close to each other. Looking at other media airing both before and during these two shows, I think it's safe to say that network TV was looking for their next Lost or Heroes equivalent. These high-concept fantastical shows that had an overarching plot, while still having a lot of the structure that the more safe shows out there had. Basically, they wanted a police procedural show with some kind of gimmick. And honestly, that's the perfect recipe for a network TV show. Something that you can enjoy as a single episode, with the wiggle room to possibly go on, well, forever. And in the case of Forever, I'd argue it pulled that off better than Awake in that the general premise was just easier to follow. We're introduced to a one Henry Morgan, a doctor shot on a ship in the 1800s that somehow resulted in him being granted immortality. Now 200 years into his curse, he works as a medical examiner in New York as an excuse to get closer to dead bodies and somehow figure out a way to end his immortality.
Every time I die, I always return in water, and I'm always naked. Now you know as much about my condition as I do.
On its surface, it has all the basic trappings of your standard TV fare circa the early to mid-2000s. A police crime procedural led by a sexy British smarty-pants guy constantly using his neurodivergent superpowers for good.
I noticed the indentations on your fingers. At first I thought violin. The spacing's a bit too wide and there's no markings under your chin, so cello.
Will They Won't They with a bland lead lady detective, basic whodunit story setups blended well with a slow IV drip of lore on Henry's own immortality. Tumblr girlies were really eating well circa the 2010s. But what I really think sells the premise is its sense of family. Unlike something like a Sherlock or Doctor Who, where the main character is a snarky smarty-pants loner that opens himself up to a larger supporting cast a la Found Family, Forever already has that baked into its lore. Early into the series' timeline, we find that Henry adopts a baby Auschwitz survivor alongside his wife Abigail, and the three really make for this unique dynamic trio of sorts. Honestly, if they really wanted to, they could have easily made a spin-off solely focusing on Henry and Abigail going on 1940s adventures, all while balancing being adopted parents to Abe. But also, I think the series had a good enough grasp of its identity to not want to branch out that far. Each episode has a good mix of standard police procedural flair, tastefully supported by Henry's flashbacks that serve as a thematic mirror to the crime being solved in the present day. And while early episodes really stick to this formula almost exclusively, the second half really starts to mix things up enough to make the series stand out a bit more. Yeah, I don't know why, but for such a fantastical premise, early episode B-plots really like to focus on Abe having some kind of love interest. Like, I get you wanted to treat the Taxi actor with some sense of TV royalty, but goddamn. Every woman past a certain age just wants to jump his bones.
What a tomato.
Abraham, she's the widow.
I'm simply offering my condolences.
By episode 11, though, we're introduced to the series' main villain in the form of a mysterious caller that claims to have lived 10 times longer than Henry. Oh, you live for 200 years? Come back when you added another 0 to that number, scrub. The villain who we learn is named David has just become so jaded with life that the second he finds another immortal in Henry, he devotes every waking minute to just fucking with him. Yeah, like I said, Tumblr girlies were really eating well in the 2010s. Or they would if the villain weren't played by that one guy from Pacific Rim. The show also begins to be more open with sharing what Henry and Abe's lives were like back when they were younger, so you have a fair amount of variety for episodes to take from.
Your ring? Yes, my ring. The one you and Mom gave me when you ditched me to go on the Orient Express.
Actually seeing not only Abe, but also Abigail both age while Henry stays the same makes for a fun narrative to follow. Stuff like the present-day Abe still clearly having that father-son relationship with Henry even though he's visibly older than him now is weirdly sweet.
I believe I'm about to beat you for the first time in 65 years.
Though inversely, we see how that dynamic can turn sour, as we see how an aging Abigail begins to get more and more self-conscious the older she gets.
The hostess thought you were so sweet to take your mother out to dinner. And did you see the way everyone looked at us when you took my hand?
And considering that we don't see her in the present day, it's clear something must have happened to her. And it's that sort of silent setup that I think Forever best excels at, while still keeping up the Crime of the Week format so you don't feel totally cheated out of an episode if you just happen to catch it while channel surfing back in the day. Though at 22 episodes, I say it's a short and solid enough series to warrant watching in its entirety. Of the shows I watched for this video, this one clearly aged the best, taking the strengths of both episodic TV and the more serialized dramas that streaming leans into. I feel like we're at this weird impasse when it comes to network TV. While there have been a handful of shows that have been able to garner a following long after their TV runs, simply due to reputation, or maybe even sheer perseverance of being on syndication long enough, I can't imagine the shows of the 2010s having that same luck. Unlike shows before or after it, there wasn't a writer's strike going on to pin the blame on their cancellation or lackluster finales. And if anything, they just had the bad luck of being a high-concept show on network TV circa the 2010s. These transitional shows that weren't quite prestige TV, but weren't quite episodic slop either. Each and every one of these shows is recent enough to have their own Twitter account, which is really weird to think about. If anything, I could see an alternate reality where these shows came out a few years later on Netflix or some obscure genre-specific niche streaming service powered solely by fan outcry. Maybe then they would have been given a fair shake. Or maybe they'd have met the same fate, who's to say? This video isn't sponsored by anyone, but I did want to give a spotlight to my local library. Yeah, believe it or not, we still live in a time where not everything is readily streamable, as was the case for literally all the shows discussed in this video. All DVDs were readily requestable via my library's online portal, and in the case that they weren't directly available in their own collection, there was a Link Plus option in which I was able to request any item in the scope of the entire state. Super cool, useful, and free as fuck. Literally the only expense is filling out the necessary information for a library card, so check out your local library and see what you've been missing out on. I promise they have more than mediocre network TV shows from the 2010s.